In this unit, we address political organization. We will talk about the different ways in which anthropologists identify political groups. One thing that we know, talking about cultural universals, and there are a number of cultural universals, political systems are one of those things that are indeed universal. They are found in general just about every culture. They may go from informal systems to formal systems, as you will see. The first are bands, and bands are very small groups. They're based primarily on kinship. They're found among foragers because, as we know, that how people gather food, our what we call subsistence technology, deeply influenced the type of societies and communities that develop as a result. And initially, we know that modern humans were anatomically modern humans were gathered in foraging groups, very small groups in the beginning, who gathered their food by hunting and fishing and collecting from plants and other small animals. Within bands, there are two types that we generally address. The first being simple bands, and those usually are anywhere from 25 to 30 people. There's not really formal leadership again, but in terms of someone being chosen or elected to lead, but the person who is looked to as the leader within that particular group has a lot of influence. It's the one that everyone else looks to. Composite bands are several groups of extended families, probably 50, maybe up to several hundred people, who also identify based on kinship in some way. And they do have a person who is a leader. In many cases, anthropologists have used the term big man primarily in observing some of the Polynesian societies, but in this case, they're political leaders who don't occupy formal offices, and their leadership is based, again, on influence, not authority. They have a way of getting things done because other people look to them, oftentimes because they're proficient in some type of skill. Maybe that they are the best hunter. They may be able to navigate the land and know a great deal about the seasons. But whatever it is, that they are the they're the one who are looked to as the leader of a particular community. Then we move to the next larger group, which we refer to as tribes. And there are generally several self-sufficient resident groups that choose to live together, usually anywhere from 1,000 to 20,000 people. There are few formal leadership positions, and the ones that are formal have limited authority. And the way one gets access to land, gets access to other types of possessions of those kinds of things is based on inheritance and or achievements. Again, how well and proficient one is with certain things. And tribes are maintained by sodalities, and sodalities are formal institutions that cross-cut communities, and they unite geographically scattered groups. They can be based on kin groups, either clans or lineages, or non-kin based groups such as age groups and warrior societies. The next type of political system would be chiefdoms. And these are where several economically interdependent resident groups come together. They live and work together. They can number anywhere from a few thousand up to maybe 30,000. And these numbers are not hard and fast, but these are general guidelines in considering these types of systems. Within chiefdoms, there is centralized leadership, and within them, there's a chief who gains their authority and their title and all of their rights through heredity. They inherit those, and generally, the being a chief is passed down through a family unit, through lineage, and they have full authorities. And chiefs are, in many societies, very powerful and looked at with a great deal of respect and the opportunity to make a lot of things happen in various cultures. The next type of political system that we would consider would be states, something that many people are familiar with, and we're talking about the United States of America, but there are many other states throughout history. Sometimes we will talk of them in terms of nation states. But a state can go anywhere from tens of thousands up to several million. There's a centralized leadership that has formal, full authority. People are elected to office. There are many different policies that are a part of a state system. There's also the use of force or violence that helps to legitimize and keep in place the state system. And they're supported by a bureaucracy. There are, as we can think about in the United States, for example, the various agencies and institutions that are a part of the various governmental bodies that are in the United States and many other countries that are bureaucracies. One of the functions of political systems is social control. And that's defined as diverse ways in which the behavior of members of a society are constrained into socially approved channels. And when we think about social control, we generally talk about it in two ways. There are two ways in which we consider social control, and remember, social control are the diverse ways in which the behavior of members of a society are constrained into socially approved channels. The first distinction we make are those types of informal social controls. The first would be gossip. In many societies, people do things to either avoid gossip or may behave in certain ways as a result of gossip. And we may not think of that, but in many societies, that's one of the ways in which this happens. It can also be scolding, as we see in this larger picture. Probably there's some discussion going on and it doesn't look like it's a pleasant one, and probably someone or both people are being scolded in this way. There's also, if we look at this picture and we look at the picture above, shaming that oftentimes will happen in ways in which, again, a person or individuals will be pointed out and singled out in a society because of their behavior. And people then, avoiding being shamed, will then act in certain ways. And then spanking, which also appears on the slide, is a form of punishment very often that parents in many societies have used with children, and in school systems, particularly in the times past, and maybe even in some places still, where school authorities would spank children, or as oftentimes referred to as corporal punishment, in a school. Another way in which social control can happen, sometimes we call it self-help, which are in stateless societies, there is what's called government by discussion. And these are cases where people will respect. In this case, we look at this picture from one of the groups in Africa and what typically happens there when decisions are made, but also when infractions happen within a culture. The community gathers, particularly the elders, and the elders make decisions, and the elders will determine the outcome and the results of particular behaviors and those kinds of things. And it happens usually, these groups function as mediators. Very often the relationship is familial, meaning they are a part of the same family or have family ties. But this is something that is common in many communities. Then we move to formal social control. And within formal social controls, law is looked at as the highest level of social control. This is where there's legal punishment for the most serious breaches. And most people are probably familiar with the formal system of social control through laws and through the court systems. And there are three general types of court systems that anthropologists identify. The first being incipient courts. Those meet informally, usually in private, to discuss issues and determine solutions. There are courts of mediation, where judges attempt to reach compromise solutions based on cultural norms and the values of the parties that are involved. And then finally, courts of regulation, and that is where there is a system of laws, codified laws, that have formally prescribed rights, duties, and sanctions. If you think about anything in the United States, from a traffic ticket all the way to murder, there are certain laws that are part of that. There's certain prescribed rights, such as a trial by a jury of one's peers. We look at Miranda rights when one is arrested, and all of those things, and then the various sanctions that happen as a result of these courts of or through these courts of regulation.